This video is sponsored by Squarespace. When you think of stunts, it's hard not to think about the Mission Impossible franchise. Over the course of this franchise's 3-decade run, the creative juices over how to set the bar higher and higher on the death-defying stunts its star actor Tom Cruise would do never seems to run out. And with the 8th installment and potential final installment of the franchise arriving, let's dive into Mission Impossible's wild world of stunts and take a look at how they pulled off the best from each film. Mission Impossible 1 was directed by Brian De Palma, who really set the tone for the entire franchise with some of the, in my opinion, best cinematography, if not the best of the series, with DP Stephen Burham at the helm. I mean, the scenes and lighting for the Prague at night sequence are just stunning. But hey, we're not here to talk about cinematography, are we? Well, you're in luck, as this movie also featured one of the most iconic stunts of the entire series, even if it was a bit simple. We're of course talking about the vault scene. Now, even though we called this stunt simple, it felt like anything but for Tom Cruise, who on early takes would keep hitting his face on the floor.
I mean, he keeps falling, hitting the ground.
And hitting his head on the floor, meaning he would just be tilting a little and have to put his hand down.
Tom told me that Brian would push him. He would say, "Come on, Cruise, you can do this."
They essentially had two guys behind the scenes to lower Cruise up and down, simulating the actor getting almost dropped on the floor in the movie. Quite a simple stunt, but very strenuous for the actor to try and keep his body off of the ground while floating. And struggle they did in getting Cruise to not be so top heavy that he would have any chance at all of not hitting his face on the ground. De Palma was about ready to just split the scene into two different shots since they couldn't seem to get it and they had a lot of other pieces to film for the day. Cruise asked the director for just one more take and looked to one of the British production members and asked for some pound coins, which he promptly put inside his shoes, hoping that it would counteract the weight at least some. This time around, Tom Cruise wouldn't hit his face.
Down on the floor, and I didn't touch, and I remember I was there, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't touch. And I was holding it, and I'm sweating, and then he just keeps rolling. And I just realized, Brian is like, he's doing it. Kid. He is working it. It's like, we did it. I'm like, I am not going to stop. And I just hear him off camera, and he's got a very distinct laugh, and a very, when he laughs, it makes me laugh. And I could just hear him start to howl, and he goes, all right, cut.
With the director enjoying watching Cruise struggle to stay off the ground, they were able to nail this shot in one sequence, showing off Cruise's tenacity that he would keep throughout the entire franchise of doing all he could to make the stunts look perfect. And honestly, the director forcing him to hold himself up for an extended period of time really worked for the tension of the scene and how quiet it was with no music.
Absolute silence.
Moving on to Mission Impossible 2 and director John Woo, who has a love of both filming violent fight sequences and pigeons for some reason. But for all of his love of action sequences, Tom Cruise really scared the director.
He liked to do something impossible,
And it was his insistence on not using a stunt double for the opening sequence of the film of rock climbing that really would get to him. I was really mad that he wanted to do it, but I tried to stop him and I couldn't. I was so scared I was sweating, I couldn't even watch the monitor when we shot it. That's because for this stunt, Tom Cruise would climb up 2,000 feet and rely solely on rigging that involved cantilevered trusses on the rim to direct ropes. Tom did all of the climbing except the slip off the overhang. His main stunt double, Keith Campbell, did that stunt. Tom was on the cliff parts of 5 days for the filming and never complained, which is rare for a big star, the director would say. Cruise recalled later on just how difficult it was to get this opening sequence, as they faced a lot of weather-related issues, and as he even had to push back against the studio, who wanted him to find a different opening sequence, but the weather kept delaying the shoot. Cruise would say, "You feel the pressure of shooting something, and for 6 months they've been wanting me to change the opening sequence. And what happened is, I remember waking up the next day and I was just just like, you have to confront this. And the sun was coming up and the wind was gone and the temperatures had come up. So I was like, let's just get to the top of the mountain and just start shooting it now. And shoot they did, using multiple cameras all running simultaneously to make sure they didn't miss a moment. But unfortunately, the shots kept getting out of focus. The director would say, we had 5 cameras on the cliff, including a helicopter camera, a camera on a crane, and cameramen hanging from safety cables. But we had focus problems, so we had to do it again and again. But Tom would say, I'm okay, John. Don't worry, I want to do it one more time. Mission Impossible 3 is where J.J. Abrams fell in love with lens flares, something that we get into in our full video of Mission Impossible 3's production. But for stunts in this film, while pretty interesting in concept, lacked the sort of kinetic and grounded feel you get throughout the rest of the franchise. And that's because the stunts in this film seem to rely a lot on green screen and visual effects more than any other film in the series. And look, I'm not bashing VFX in this or not saying that there's not copious amounts of visual effects that were used in many of the other stunts throughout the franchise. Even though I must say, ILM did a pretty good job on it. Especially with this bridge stunt, where they had to combine 6 different non-motion controlled shots that, according to ILM VFX artist Todd Vaziri, took an enormous amount of roto, paint, 3D tracking, and 2D tracking to make it all work, while also, in the end, making sure that they could add J.J. Abrams' signature shaky cam look back to the whole thing. In fact, the main goal for director J.J. Abrams in this film was to combine both practical and VFX and a bunch of other elements to really confuse the viewers on how they actually pulled some of it off.
But the dream was that it just sort of all feels like it's really happening and you don't understand the machinations of sort of how it was done. But it really took the, synchronizing of a lot of departments and really talented people to sort of all pull off the one ultimate, illusion.
This, of course, made work difficult for VFX artists like Todd Vaziri, but even he would get a kick out of all of the theories that people came up with trying to figure out the bridge sequence. And according to him, none of those theories ever came close. So all in all, while the stunts of this film potentially suffer under the weight of what the other films in the franchise accomplished, there are some really cool VFX elements to it that are pretty insane how they were even able to pull them off in the first place. With all that being said though, if we were to look at one impressive stunt in this film that we could cover, it would have to be the swinging in between the buildings stunt. It's a really funny stunt and one you could be forgiven for assuming that it was just done for real, as it's something Tom Cruise would most likely figure out how to do for real today. But it actually was, again, a clever combination of VFX and real capture plates, with Tom Cruise performing the stunts on a stage with green screen.
Tom actually chose to do this run and this jump.
He had to walk up to the edge of the building, look over and say, okay, I'm gonna jump out into space over there.
Now, with that being said, Cruise would still perform that jump in the studio, and it was a decent jump at that.
Cable, he just went back 30 paces and just ran and launched himself into space.
That allowed us to follow him as he went off.
Our sponsor Squarespace is also introducing us to a new way of designing a website with its new design intelligence. And it's a lot easier than learning how to play jazz. The cutting-edge AI technology helps you to create a website that fits your preferred style and brand, but without you having to do all the heavy lifting. With dynamic dashboards, website copy, product descriptions, and a whole lot more, this helps you to easily build a professional, great-looking website to drive clients or customers to. And with Squarespace Payments, you can manage all of your payments in one place with methods like Klarna, ACH Direct Debit, Apple Pay, and more. You can even collect invoice payments from your clients through Squarespace as well, keeping everything in one location. So be sure to try out the awesome new design intelligence system now at squarespace.com. And when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/FrameVoyager to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using the code FrameVoyager. All right, now we're getting into some of the serious stunts of the franchise. And who would guess that one of the most absurd stunts will be directed by this guy, Brad Bird, who up until this point had only directed animated films like The Incredibles or Ratatouille and The Iron Giant. And he wanted to go big for his debut live action film. So he brought in an IMAX camera.
I pushed hard in the earliest meetings I had where Tom Cruise, J.J. Abrams, and I went to Paramount to discuss what we wanted to do with this movie. And I pitched the idea of shooting several sequences in IMAX. For me, the most immersive experience was actually filming in IMAX because the detail and the clarity is just unparalleled.
And what did he want to use that IMAX camera for? Just to stick it out of the window of the Burj Khalifa thousands of feet up in the air? And yes, the IMAX camera wouldn't be the only thing outside the building. Tom Cruise would decide he wanted to play around thousands of feet up in the air with the IMAX camera for this insane stunt as well. Now, how did they pull off this complicated stunt? There were a lot of challenges ahead for the crew, mainly ones that had to do with trust from the Dubaians they ended up working with, as shooting for Mission Impossible 4 ended up being a complicated affair and even required some modifications to the Burj Khalifa itself. And officials in the country and engineers for the building were not overly convinced that this could work.
We would have to drill into the ground, we'd have to drill into the ceilings, and we had to get permission for every hole that we drilled. We had to start taking windows out. And these are windows that had never been taken out and aren't meant to come out.
The crew meticulously documented and obtained permission for each drilled hole to secure large cameras and cranes and fixtures. However, other modifications such as smashing windows to allow Tom Cruise and the camera to poke out of the building required negotiation and approval with the engineers, who again thought it was crazy to try and take out the windows.
At first, there was a big resistance about taking them out, and we said, look, if windows can go in, they can come out. If we can't do that, then we can't do the sequence. So there were conversations that took place about that, and everyone found a way to do it.
Oh, that's high.
The crew strategically smashed 26 windows at different locations, providing better access for the stunt team, IMAX cameras, and Tom Cruise. And it's hard not to imagine how this worried some of the engineers, or even what could happen if a window went the wrong way and plunged thousands of feet below. But thankfully, it all worked out. However, this created 26 gaping holes in the exterior of the skyscraper, meaning that, someone could fall out of it now. So to ensure safety, additional holes were drilled into the ceiling near the opening of the windows to secure safety hooks.
Safety became a huge issue. So we had to create these red boxes that were taped out, and anybody who stepped inside of that tape had to have a harness and had to be tied off.
Even though this was super high up, stuntmen perceived little difference in risk between working at 50, 500, or even 1,000 feet. Regardless of the height, equipment failure, or recklessness results in the same outcome: a fatal fall. The only assistance available then is from a funeral service. Though I can't imagine that the psychological aspect of it just goes away with such a scientific thought.
It was like 4 a.m. Suddenly my eyes just snapped open and I realized the star of our movie is like swinging around on the outside of the tallest building in the world, held on by like a tiny wire.
The team would also construct a replica of the Burj Khalifa's exterior windows in a studio and use heat lamps to simulate the intense heat of the sun. So crews trained on this replica to rehearse the movements and acclimate to the heat before filming on the actual building.
And it was also physically getting training in the harness. And I would do speed climbs where for 30 minutes I would just climb up and down, so that I was ready when the camera was ready and that no one would be waiting for me.
Although they were able to capture all of the shots they needed safely, this was a nightmare for VFX artists. It was a huge challenge to remove the safety rig wires used in filming Tom Cruise climbing the Burj Khalifa. The building's mirrored exterior and multiple wire reflections made it difficult to track and paint out the wires. But in the end, through all of this incredibly difficult work, they would get one of the most iconic stunt sequences of all time. Mission Impossible Rogue Nation brought yet another director change, though this would be the final time a new director would get his hands on the franchise, with Christopher McQuarrie taking full control over the last half of the franchise films. And for his opening sequence of the film, he decided to kick off his debut Mission Impossible film with an insane stunt. In all honesty, how Cruise was able to pull off this stunt without falling off is pretty simple. Tom Cruise really did hang off of a plane, but with minimal safety equipment. The only safety measures were a wire leading to the camera and a strap attached to the plane's side door, which prevented him from being blown away by the wind. Though Cruise did mention how difficult it was to stay with his feet planted on the plane, even with all of that attached to him.
There was an incredibly precise margin of error in the throttle. The plane had to be going fast enough to stay airborne, but it couldn't be going so fast that Tom simply would be torn off regardless of of what safety measures we had.
The fuselage also required several modifications, including a mount to hold the attached camera. However, these modifications needed to be proposed first, as there was anxiety and doubt surrounding the feasibility of such a stunt.
Airbus did not know for certain that the plane could structurally deal with what we were considering.
We basically looked at you like you were crazy, to be honest. So we had to convince them. So from my side, it was a lot of drawings and engineering and a lot of talks and letting them trust me.
The danger doesn't only lie in potentially falling off, however. There were a litany of potential dangers that could happen at any time. A bird could impact crews, which could lead to serious injury or death.
As he came in, he hit an owl. He hit it so hard, you can actually see the feathers.
We simply could not control the variable of birds flying in the path of that airplane. And if a bird hit Tom at that speed on any part of his body, that would have been the end.
A piece of debris could get flung in Tom's direction as well.
Any particle that could hit me, even a small little rock.
If it was sucked into the propeller and hit Tom, it would be traveling at the speed of a bullet.
And to top it all off, the jet exhausts are toxic and could poison crews due to his proximity to the engines. Yet despite all of these dangers and concerns, Tom Cruise seemed to enjoy himself and would do 8 more takes of the sequence. And this stunt would almost cause McQuarrie to not direct the next film because he couldn't imagine doing anything crazier than that. You know, until he did do many more stunts that were just as insane. Fallout is certainly the correct title for this film, as Tom Cruise really does fall out of a lot of stuff. Out of the side of a window, off of a rope attached to a helicopter, off of a roof, breaking his ankle, and from a halo jump he did for real. And though that halo jump might feel like the place to go for this film when talking about stunts, don't worry, we will cover that in our upcoming video on the production of this film on May 20th. But Tom Cruise did something that I think warrants some discussion on this film in particular, and that happens to be that he actually flew a helicopter through the mountains.
Tom and I have been talking about for years creating a helicopter chase. That means shooting the star of your movie, flying one of the helicopters.
It's crazy enough to have an actual aerial stunt scene happening for a feature film, let alone the star of your film flying a helicopter for that said stunt. And training to pilot a helicopter is not something that can be done by skipping steps.
I fly aerobatic airplanes and warbirds. I'm the pilot. But helicopters, I'd really never flown. I wasn't licensed.
So we started Tom's training almost 2 years ago, learning to fly helicopters. We got him his license, and then he spent the next year or so practicing.
Tom Cruise would really take to the training, reportedly working 16 hours a day to reach the 2,000-hour milestone required for the helicopter training. But Tom Cruise wouldn't just be flying a helicopter normally. He'd be flying it with 13 other helicopters close by, and with mountains everywhere around them.
The mountains cause wind, and they cause turbulence. It takes a while. There's no substitute for experience.
Although this scene was supposed to be taking place in Norway, they would film in New Zealand as a location in Norway that they were shooting at didn't allow for them to fly helicopters through the mountains, or at least how they were doing it for this stunt. But this location in New Zealand offered the perfect location for the stunt, as they were set up to accommodate this sort of thing. But though Cruise had finished his training and they found their location, they still had to find the right helicopter for the job.
We were looking desperately for a helicopter. We wanted something that was highly maneuverable, but you also wanted something that had enough of an open glass canopy that you could see out and you could see in. That led us to the Airbus 125, which is a fantastic, fantastic helicopter.
Now that they found their helicopter, they would develop a whole new camera system to capture Cruise's performance, because not only was he flying a helicopter, but he was also acting while doing it.
Well, in the 15 years that I've been building camera mounts, we always try to get the camera mounts as close to the aircraft as possible, because the tighter in you get, the more stable they are. But now we're seeking to put them way out in space, and that's been a challenge.
We had to go experimental mode on this. Everything is way beyond what you could get certification on a normal, everyday commercial flying machine.
Once they were finally airborne and ready to do the stunt, it became even more difficult to coordinate what was happening with so many helicopters in the air. So communication was really key.
We're flying in the mountains. It's some of the most dangerous conditions to fly in, and you have to really know what you're doing because the mountains can kill you.
It's extremely narrow, and we're shooting with an extremely wide lens. The sense of claustrophobia in there was very extreme.
And to make this all the more dangerous, Cruise trained hard to be able to perform a difficult corkscrew maneuver.
It's an alpine descent. The risk of that is you can overspeed the rotor head and the blades. And if they overspeed for too long, they just literally pop off, and then you're just a rock that drops.
And of course, Tom Cruise pulled it off perfectly.
Whoa!
Whoa, too much, too much!
It should be pretty obvious which stunt would get picked for this film. I mean, how do you not cover someone jumping a bike off the side of a cliff and then parachuting down the rest of the way?
We've been working on this for years. We're going to shoot it in Norway. And it would be a motorcycle jump off a cliff into a base jump. I wanted to do it since I was a little kid. It all comes down to one thing: the audience.
The audience's demand for bigger and bolder stunts was met with this motorcycle jump. While it may appear simple, the stunt required Tom Cruise to train with experts in motorbiking, base jumping, and speed flying.
For base training, advanced skydive training, a lot of canopy skills, a lot of tracking.
Tom Cruise, he's an amazing individual. You tell him something and he just locks it in.
The production team practiced alongside Cruise to ensure they could safely capture the stunt, using specialized equipment such as Z-cams to get close-up shots during the stunt.
Coming up with the stunt is only one of the technical challenges. The other is putting a camera in a place that you can see where Tom is doing it. Finding the right lens, the right platform, the right medium. Even 2 years ago, the cameras didn't exist.
Now, there were some problems to figure out, namely weather conditions and how they could impact the jump. And of course, making sure that every time Cruise did the jump, it was consistent and got him far enough away from the cliff. Luckily, during the training, the production team would carefully track Cruise's jumping by attaching a GPS to him and taking careful weather data to understand how to get a consistent and safe shot.
And by doing this multiple times, we were able to get a consistent set of data
so that each take we can see what height I am. So this way we can set drones and cameras in places where I can go right into close-up.
Preparation was key for these stunts, as the fewer times you had to repeat the stunt, the better for everyone involved. Now, with all of that preparation complete, it was time to finally do it for real on top of a mountain in Norway, a place the production team had experience filming in, as in just the last film they had to build an entire media village on top of a remote ledge. And just like the previous film, they would have to fly everything in by helicopter, taking months to construct the pieces for the stunt. And it all had to be precisely built to specifications based on their initial testing, and any deviation from that could prove fatal for Cruise.
The challenge is finding the cameras, it's the amount of preparation, and then it's weather.
You want the light to be right, you want the clouds to be right. Misty, but not foggy. This weather right here is exactly what we're looking for.
With the right weather conditions in place, Cruise would get ready for the craziest jump of his life. And likely just for fun for him, he would do the stunt a total of 6 times that day.
One last time.
With the Mission Impossible 8 hitting theaters, it seems like McQuarrie and Cruise upped the stakes yet again. Cruise seemingly so hell-bent on getting the perfect stunt that McQuarrie had to shut him down on one particular stunt, saying, "I truly wanted to puke thinking about the stress. It was intense. He approached me to do number 20, and I said, 'You're done. Do not anger the gods.'"
Hi, everyone. Wish I could be there with you. I'm sorry for all the extra noise.
In Mission Impossible 8, Tom Cruise will be hanging from a biplane, doing some insane underwater sequence which made him accidentally breathe in carbon dioxide, and jumping from a fighter jet, and jumping from an aircraft carrier into the ocean. Now, as far as the details are concerned for those stunts, we don't have a lot of details just yet, but we will be covering it in our production of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning video that comes out on May 22nd, and the whole Mission Impossible series starting on May 15th, with new episodes releasing every day until the movie releases. And you can check out the rest of that series right here.